Hello, you beautiful people. Today we are back with another waiver wire must roster video. But before we begin, I just want you guys to know that I'm not bullshitting you with anything I say. So I'm going to go back. This is my waiver wire must roster from last week, and we're just going to go ahead and take a quick look at it, see the players that I said, see how many I messed up on, see how many I got right. Like, I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I hate when fantasy channels sort of give you must rosters and then don't talk about whenever they were wrong or whatever. So we'll just go ahead and get into it. Mo Bamba, that was a pretty good, solid one. I stand by it. He was my long-term pick. Josh Giddey. Didn't have a great week, but long term, I do still hold his value. Andre Drummond, of course, that was an easy one. Rubio had a solid week. Poole was a little bit down, but not too bad. Maxey, I mean, he should have been number one. He was going off. Shake was a bad pick. Allen was decent. Batum was all right. Young was a good pick. Korkmaz was pretty shit. Jalen Brunson was solid, and so was Gary Payton. So overall, I mean, I'll give us like 11 out of 13 hesitantly, so not too bad. I mean, we're never going to get all 13 or every single player right on these must roster videos, but I just want you guys to sort of trust what I'm saying and know, like, I'm not above admitting when I was wrong. Like, Shake and Korkmaz, really bad pickups. Sorry, I'm not going to get them all right. Like I said, this is just my opinion, and I just want to give a quick disclaimer to you guys. I hope you guys appreciate this. I'm not trying to rip anybody off or just move on past my mistakes. I'm trying to get better at fantasy too, like help you guys out. So yeah, that's just a good lesson to learn, and we'll just go ahead and get into the must roster players for this week now. So as always, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe if you're new. We're trying to hit 2,000 subscribers on the channel, so if you can help me guys out, I really appreciate it. We've actually just been on the path to securing some sponsorships for the channel, so a massive thank you to you guys. Hopefully we'll get some ads rolling here soon. Really appreciate all the support, and yeah, let's just keep it going. So I sort of decided to break it up this week into some must roster for the long term and must roster for the short term. I sort of mixed them last week, but this week I'm just going to keep them separate. First up, the player that I think is a must roster for the long term is going to be Ricky Rubio. And I should also mention before I start, they are sort of ranked in order of who I would pick up first. I'm not saying that any of these guys are like not rosterable players, because like I said, I do think they are all must roster, but it's just sort of, I would probably pick up Ricky Rubio first and then Will Barton, as you can see, and just sort of go down the list in that fashion. But yeah, anyway, Ricky Rubio, I put him on my list last week, long term. I stand by it. He's had a really consistent week last week, put up some really solid performances. Had a 37-point game, a 28-point game, 26-point game. The assists are there, the minutes are there. He's getting around 30-plus minutes a game right now, and I don't see any reason for that to drop. The Cavs have been solid. They beat the Celtics in one of the most painful experiences of my life, because it seems like every game the Celtics just blow it, but we're not going to get into that right now. Yeah, I really like what I'm seeing out of Rubio. I do think he is a long-term ad. We don't know when Sexton's going to be returning, but while he is out, Rubio is a must-roster player. Top of my list. If he's on any waiver wires, I'm grabbing him. I don't think he's rostered in nearly enough leagues right now either. I believe he's only rostered in about 59%. Let me just double check. Yeah, 54% even. So the odds are, if you're in an 8-team league, Ricky Rubio is on your waiver wire, and he's just too consistent of a performer right now to be left there. So he's going to do it for my first pickup. Next up is going to be Will Barton. This is a long-term ad. I think it's pretty evident why. He's been playing out of his mind with Michael Porter Jr. out. The Nuggets are struggling for scoring. It's pretty much Jokic doing everything. I mean, as it usually is, but at least he had Jamal Murray helping him out last year and Michael Porter Jr., but Jamal Murray's out. Michael Porter Jr. is missing in action, and it looks like Will Barton's really stepped up into his role. The reason you might be a little skeptical if you're in a tough matchup is he is hurt this week, or he missed Monday's game. He might be back for Thursday, but it remains to be seen. But yeah, I do think long-term Will Barton does hold a lot of value. The scoring potential's there. Doesn't really contribute too much in the other categories, but he grabs a decent amount of rebounds for like a wing. So I think he is a must-roster player as well for points leagues. Then we move on to Reggie Jackson, who was giving me a little bit of a heart attack yesterday because he was having a really crappy first half, but he picked it up, finished with 24, which isn't great, but not too bad. 24 fantasy points in default leagues, I should mention. But yeah, I think so far the Clippers have looked all right. They really need Reggie Jackson. He's sort of their number 2 scoring option. And right now he's been delivering at an acceptable rate. He's averaging around 18 points per game on the season. And not too much outside of that, but when you're looking for like players that you can pick up off the waiver wire, if they can put in 18 points per game, then that's just really solid production. So yeah, I do think Reggie Jackson should be a rostered player in pretty much every league. I think he is must roster, even in 8-team leagues. He's rostered in 65% of leagues right now. I do think that should probably be up around 75. And yeah, every guy on this list is rostered below 70%, I should mention, just so everyone's aware of that. If you're asking like, oh, where is this player? If they're above 70% rostered, I don't really consider them a waiver wire guy because they're pretty much rostered in almost every league. So that's going to do it for him. And then next up, we have one of my favorite players in the league, Jalen Brunson. he is one that is rostered in a criminally low number of leagues. He's rostered in 28% of leagues on ESPN, and I think he's a must roster player, at least in 12 and 10 leagues, 12 team and 10 team leagues. It's not even a question in my mind. Maybe 8 team, you'd be a bit hesitant, but I just think Jalen Brunson is such a consistent performer. He's playing he's playing so well this season. I think you have to give him a roster spot in a points league. I have him higher than some other guys on the list that are rostered in more leagues, but I just think Jalen Brunson has such a high upside. He's been playing so well for the Mavericks. It looks like now that Rick Carlisle's out, he was sort of kind of hoeing Jalen Brunson with the minutes, but Jason Kidd has been providing them. He's getting around 30 minutes a game. And yeah, he's making really good use of it. So for Jalen Brunson, one of my favorite players, love him. Very low turnover rate. He contributes like a lot more assists than you'd think for a backup point guard, quote unquote. But as he is getting 30 minutes a game, he's just having the ball in his hands a lot more. And he's a solid scorer as well. Capable of having some really good nights. But overall, if he's averaging like 15 points per game right now, even if he just maintains that, I think he is a must roster player in every like league format, whether it be 8, 10, or 12 team. And yeah. Next up, a guy that's coming back from injury, but he's had an alright return all the same. It's going to be Dillon Brooks. He's averaging 20 points per game so far, and he's sort of on a soft minutes restriction as he is returning from an injury, but once that gets cleared up, he's definitely a must roster player. So I think it's worth like grabbing him if he's on your waiver wire for now, because long term I do think he's going to have some 8-team value. So he's only rostered in 33% of leagues. He is up 17% as a lot of people are becoming more aware of him and giving him an ad. But yeah, on the Grizzlies, they're really struggling for scoring outside of Ja. Nobody else is really providing that consistent scoring, and it looks like Dillon Brooks might be the solution there. If he's going to put up 20 points per game, I don't know if that's necessarily going to maintain itself, but I do think it's going to be damn near pretty close. Like maybe it'll fall down to like 17 or 18. But I do think Dillon Brooks is a must roster in points league. I don't think he should be left on any waiver wires. Even in an 8-team, I'm picking him up if he's on my waivers. He's averaging 30 fantasy points per game right now, but like I said, he's on a minutes restriction. He's just coming back from injury, still getting back into the swing of things. I do think that'll pick up, and I do consider him must roster. Then we have a guy that I'm just so confused about because I put him must roster for sure. I forgot to put him on last week's must roster because I assumed he'd be more short term because Siakam was coming back. Then Siakam came back and it didn't slow him down, and he still was putting up some insane fantasy numbers. It's mainly getting carried by his steals per game. He is averaging 2.5 steals per game on the season. And yeah, that's just something that I don't think anybody really saw coming, but Gary Trent Jr. has been a very nice fantasy ad if you were able to get him off the waiver wire. So far, he's rostered in 59% of leagues. I do think he is must roster in any league format, all the way up to 8-team. Even, I don't know if 6-team would be pushing it, but 8, 10, and 12, which is what the majority of people play, I do think he is absolutely must roster, no question there. And I put him in the long term for now. Maybe when the Siakam is fully integrated, Gary Trent will take a big hit, but so far he's playing like 35 minutes per game, shooting the ball well, like I already mentioned, contributing in the steals category, excuse me. And yeah, I just think he is must roster. He's a great player, great 3-point shooter. So far he's playing really well for the Raptors, and if you were able to get him off waiver wires, like I said, props to you because he's really taking off this season. Then we have a guy who is a bit up and down, which I did mention last week. He sort of has like the hot and cold stretches, which that's just how it is when you get like a streaky shooter. But yeah, it's going to be Jordan Poole, and his long-term value, I believe, holds up until Klay Thompson returns to the lineup. Once Klay is back, I do think Jordan Poole takes a pretty harsh fall off. I don't really consider him must roster at that point, but I guess we'll have to see when that is or how the Warriors shake out when Klay Thompson's back into the lineup. But yeah, he did have a bit of a down last 3 games after going nuclear. Like, he had a 40-point fantasy game, 37 of 58, a 34, and then it sort of went 20, 23, and 16 the last 3. I do think it'll pick up, so long term, I do think Jordan Poole is worth an ad. He's rostered in 62% of leagues. I do think he's rosterable in like all the way up to 8-team. Like I said, I consider him must roster. Even though he is having a poor week, like I said, that's just how it is with streaky shooters, and I think his upside's too high to leave him on any waiver wires, so hopefully that makes sense. And then lastly, for my must roster for the long term, is someone that was getting dropped in a lot of leagues. He's down 10% in ESPN leagues, that is. And it's going to be Josh Giddey. Now, I mentioned him in my long term ads for last week, and I stand by it. Like, he is a rookie. He's flashing some really good potential in the assists and rebounds categories. The scoring isn't really where you'd like it to be. The field goal percentage, the threes aren't there. But if you're in a categories league and you need some assists, I do think Josh Giddey's must roster. Similarly, if you're in a points league, I just think like as the season progresses, he has shown potential to put up big points nights, and I feel like you just can't really leave him on any waiver wires. I'm probably going to, in an 8 team, maybe I'm comfortable leaving him there, but in 10 and 12 team leagues, no shot I'm dropping Josh Giddey right now. I know he's going through a bit of a lower scoring points run than you'd like, but I do think it's going to pick up, and I would consider Josh Giddey must roster in 10 team and up leagues. And you could make a case for dropping him in an 8 team. I probably wouldn't as of right now, because I do think he has a lot of upside, as I already mentioned. But yeah, that's going to go ahead and do it for the long-term ads. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the short-term streamers. It sort of varies in how long I think they should be held for. Some guys it's just for one game today. Some guys it's for like a few games this week. But yeah, I'll sort of specify that for each individual player. But let's just go ahead and get right into it. Alright, so as I'm recording this, it just got announced that Mobley's going to miss up to 2 to 4 weeks with his injury. So if we look at the Cavs right now, they're missing Allen, Mobley, Sexton, Markkanen, and Love. So I think I'm going to add, I already made this, but I'm going to add Isaac Okoro to the list of the short-term ads. I do think he has a lot of upside because Cleveland literally has nobody, so it's looking like Rubio is going to be an even better ad for this week. Going to be a big week for Rubio and Garland. Hopefully Allen is back in time for the Cavs, but yeah, I think Okoro could be like the tertiary benefactor of this sort of situation with Mobley being out, so remains to be seen who's going to step up for the Cavs. I just think Rubio and Garland's numbers are going to be even higher. And then I don't know who else. Maybe we'll get some Windler or something stupid. Who knows, man? It's fantasy. Anything can happen. But I'm going to go ahead and assume that Okoro gets a bigger role and scores some more fantasy points. So we'll add him on the short-term ads, see how things are looking. Now we'll go ahead and get into the people that are actually on the list. So first off, Talen Horton-Tucker. I think he is a short-term ad because it's rumored that LeBron's going to come back on Friday. So if we look at the schedule for the week, I think Talen Horton-Tucker is a good ad for the Wednesday game. If you guys aren't aware of this, there's a really helpful schedule analyzer called if you go on hashtag basketball, I'll link it in the description. It's got the schedule for every team for the week, so you can see what teams play when, who's playing on what night, and how many games each team has per week. Ooh, a little voice crack for you guys. Love to hear that. But yeah, they're playing Milwaukee on Wednesday, so I think Talen Horton-Tucker is a good ad for then. And then if LeBron's back on Friday, I mean, maybe I'll hold Talen Horton-Tucker. I think he's still going to start. I think he's starting over Bazemore 100%, but his usage is definitely going to be way down, and I don't know if he's going to contribute as many fantasy points, so he might not be must roster, but I mean, it's worth a shot taking a flyer on a guy. I think he has really high upside for Wednesday, and we'll just sort of go from there. And then moving on to someone that I think is getting massively overlooked for some reason, and I don't really know why. Everyone sort of got an infatuation with Bones Highland because a lot of fantasy channels have been shouting him out. And he did get hurt last game, which is kind of unfortunate, but who I think steps into the limelight in this situation is actually Monte Morris. And Monte Morris is another fantasy player that I am a huge fan of, sort of like similar to Jalen Brunson, the low turnovers, a smart basketball player, makes the right pass, just a really good team player. And yeah, the past 2 games, he had 45 fantasy points, 43 fantasy points, and he played 37 minutes last night, and I do think that's probably going to continue if Bones is out, which I don't know how the severity of the injury, but if he does miss additional time, that's just really going to help Morris's fantasy numbers. But even if Bones is there, who knows? He'll probably be on a little bit of a minutes restriction coming off an injury. So yeah, I think Monte Morris for this week is a really good waiver wire pickup that's being very overlooked. I would definitely pick him up in a 10 or 12 team league, 100%. 8 team, maybe not, but I think I would take him in an 8 team, honestly. I think he does have upside. If you have a streaming spot and THT and all the long-term guys are gone, then I'd go ahead and pick up a Monte Morris there. Then we move on to Eric Bledsoe. Everybody knows him, the most inconsistent man of all time. You never really know what you're going to get. Could get a really good game out of Bledsoe. He could be shit. That's sort of the risk you take. You got to run it sometimes. They're playing San Antonio tonight. I think he is worth a pickup there. He's on sort of a good stretch for Eric Bledsoe where he's not shooting too poorly for the field. Last 7 days, he's averaging 17 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds. So decent upside there. I think I'm comfortable streaming him for this week. Maybe he could move into the long-term ads if he ever got any sort of consistency whatsoever, but it doesn't really seem... That seems like we're asking a little too much of Bledsoe, so I'm going to put him in the short-term ads for this week for streams. And then we move on to someone who's sort of revitalizing the career after he had the heart scare and then he retired and now he's back. But LaMarcus Aldridge has been a very solid under-the-radar performer this season, and I'm considering him a must-roster waiver wire ad for this week. They are playing Golden State, who have one of the best defenses in the league, but I do think LaMarcus Aldridge overall is still going to put up some decent fantasy numbers. I think he's worth the stream. He's only rostered in 24% of leagues, so he's probably in most of your waiver wires. And yeah, I do think it's worth a look. I mean, I wasn't expecting this at all going into the season. I was not high on LaMarcus Aldridge. I didn't really think he would have any fantasy relevance. But yeah, it is worth pointing out that the Nets play on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, so you stream Aldridge, you could drop him and pick up another streamer for the weekend. Just something worth thinking about if you're making these streaming decisions. And then, yeah, next up on my list, if you had my top 3 favorite NBA players in the league, this man is in there. No question. I love me some Lou Dort. I got the jersey. Man, something about Lou Dort, bro. I'm just obsessed. He's Canadian. I'm Canadian. It's just there. So the thing with Lou Dort for fantasy is the scoring numbers, very inconsistent. He's sort of a more defensive-oriented player, I would say, but on the season he's still averaging 15 points, but it hasn't been too efficient. But the last 4 games, my boy Lou Dort putting up at least 20 points the last 4 games. Well, I'm just saying, bro, must roster this week. If he can keep up this stretch of play, I do think he's rosterable in all the way up to 8-team leagues. Putting up very solid production. Had a 38-point fantasy game, 40, 33, 32. I do think that is very solid value, especially from a streamer. I don't know if he's going to work its way into the long term because, like I said, I haven't seen that sort of consistency from Lou Dort as much as I love him. And yeah, he's only rostered in 17% of leagues, so if you're in a 10 or 12 team, I would grab him right now. I think he's a wonderful option for this week, and I'm definitely not leaving him on the waiver wire. Then we move on to another guy who honestly could move into the long-term ads. I'm just a little hesitant to put him there right now because I want to see a bit more out of him first, like for a bit longer stretch of time. And another caveat with this streamer is going to be Devin Vassell. But yeah, the Spurs only have 2 games this week, so they play today, which is a Tuesday, and they play Thursday. So if you're going to stream Vassell, just be aware that after Thursday, you're probably going to have to drop him and pick up someone else. And yeah, I don't know. I thought Derek White was really going to step up this year, but he's sort of been lacking in his production. He's not shooting the ball well at all from the field. And Devin Vassell's really stepped it up the past week, and he's been averaging 18 points per game, 5 rebounds. Doesn't really contribute anything crazy outside of the scoring, but the scoring's there. He's been knocking down his threes, and I think it's worth streaming him for the week. The Spurs, like I said, just be aware of the schedule thing. If you have Vassell after Thursday, you're going to have to stream someone else. So that's just something to be aware of, but I do consider a must roster or a must stream for this Tuesday-Thursday games that he has this week. And we move on to Royce O'Neal. We're getting into the deeper league ads now. Royce O'Neal's been solid production. He's getting hella minutes, so if the guy's playing 33 minutes a game, obviously he's not their number 1 or number 2 option or anything on the Jazz, but he contributes enough in like the defensive categories, grabs the occasional rebound, nothing crazy, gets the open 3 here and there. I think it's worth a stream in like 14-team leagues, maybe 12-team, that'd be a stretch, but 14-team and up, I think Royce O'Neal's pretty good streaming option for this week. And then we have Desmond Bane, who is getting dropped in a lot of leagues. He's down 15%, which, I mean, I get it. His production hasn't been as stellar as it was when he was averaging like 35 plus a game, but he's still maintaining like a 25-ish average. So I think in 14-team leagues, must stream for this week. He's only rostered in 18.5% of leagues now. 12-team, I'm probably not going to stream him, but 14, I think that's worth the ad. And then, I mean, maybe here I am talking myself into a 12-team ad here when I was just against it. This is the indecisiveness that you got to love on the channel. But yeah, Desmond Bane, I do consider a must roster for 14-team and up 100%. And then, you know, maybe you could convince me of a 12-team ad, but I would probably add any of the other guys that I have on this list for short-team ads ahead of him. And then we're going to finish it off with big sleeper. This is for the very deep leagues. Want to give a huge shout out to my boy in the Discord World on Music because he sort of put me on to, I'm going to butcher this name, but Chimezie Metu. He's been getting some decent minutes for the Kings. Had 32 minutes last game, had 24 before that. Don't expect anything crazy, but when you're in like a 14, 16, 18, 20 team league, there's nothing on the waivers, man. If you're in one, you know what I'm talking about. There's absolute jack shit there. So if you get a player that's having a decent run of production, you got to go for him. So I think Chimezie Metu could be a decent ad for you if you're in a deeper league. I'm not going to like bet my house on it or anything, but I mean, if a guy's showing any flashes of potential in a deep league, he's worth the pickup. So that is going to wrap it up for the video. Thank you guys very much for watching. Oh man, I didn't even advertise the Discord. Look, I'm goofing. But yeah, if you want to talk about fantasy basketball, NBA stuff, any trade related questions you have for fantasy, waiver wire pickups just like this video, then join the Discord, man. Link in the description. Great community in there. Highly recommend. And yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. And as always, I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day.